Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's been a little bit of time. I've been a little busy, as always, working hard, writing my stories, trying to find ways to market my books, and so on and so forth. So today I thought it would be kind of fun for you to get a sneak peek behind the curtain of my mind. I know that's a scary thought to do, but I figured it might be a little fun for you guys to see how sometimes us writers and authors find inspiration in the weirdest and strangest places on creating a story. So I wanted to share a little bit of the behind the scenes of one of my stories found in my new novel, Tales from Other Worlds and Realms, Volume 1, of how that short story came to be. And as I've mentioned in previous videos and in other places, that Tales from Other Worlds and Realms isn't for the faint of heart. It's definitely a more intense story, a more intense collection of stories that people may not have the best. Sorry, I'm trying to find the right words for this, but it might not be their particular cup of tea. So I'm going to take a moment and pause to let you guys, find a different video, click on a different video, because, like I said, most of these stories found in this collection are thrillers and are a little darker. And this is one of the little darker stories. So I'm going to give you guys a quick moment, a little moment for you guys to turn back now, walk away. If you're not into dark, creepy, and thrilling stories, this video is probably not for you. So I'm going to give you guys a moment to back out and find a different video to watch. For those of you who have stayed, welcome, and get ready for an intense look behind the curtains behind one of my stories, Be Careful What You Steal. This story, the short story, is found, like I said, in my novel, Tales from Other Worlds and Realms, Volume 1, which was just released this January of 2026. Now, this is an interesting story, and I'm also working on video editing, so please bear with me if this video is different than my usual vlogs and different, because I want to incorporate a little bit of why I was inspired to create this story. And you could say it all started with this particular story when I was rewatching a series called Dark Angel. Now, many of you people don't know of Dark Angel. It's been years since it was broadcast and aired, but I have the DVD collection of Dark Angel, and I went and started watching it again, and I was always mesmerized by the plot to Dark Angel. Or sorry, not the plot, the pilot episode, the very first episode of Dark Angel. Because in the very first episode of Dark Angel, we see Max, and this is where in my video edits I'm going to try to include certain screenshots and things from Dark Angel. So you should be watching a few scenes and clips from Dark Angels to help paint this picture and explain my thought process. So in the story of Dark Angel, in the very first episode, she's out delivering packages, and then she notices this mesmerizing cat statue. And her being poor and trying to live in this crazy, ridiculous world, she figures, why not steal this precious artifact? So she comes up with a heist to go in and steal this beautiful cat-like statue. And in her attempts to steal the statue, she fails to steal the statue. She has to run away and leave the statue behind. And then later down in the episode, we see her, she just comes home. She's been riding her bike, it looks like, and she's getting undressed. She lays down, and then all of a sudden, she shoots up and sees that the cat statue is right there. And she figures out what happened, that the guy that she stole it from just gave it to her as a gift. You could say a bribe to help him get her to help him with a certain project that he was doing. And seeing that scene again as an adult, I was thinking about how creepy would it be if that cat statue was actually a cursed statue? What if it was magical? Because with Dark Angel, it's mainly a sci-fi show. It's a futuristic show about super soldiers, for those that don't know about the show. Max is a super soldier. She is a government experiment in this show. But me being the fantasy mind, I was wondering, what if we took that statue? Let's take this scenario. Let's take this concept, this idea, and let's roll with it. Let's see what I can make of this. So I had this idea, this concept of what would happen if this statue was cursed. So I started building upon that idea. I was wondering, what would it be like if Max discovered a cursed statue instead of just a regular trinket, a regular artifact? What if this artifact that she discovered and wanted to steal was cursed? And for those of you that don't know, Dark Angel is a sci-fi show. So it's basically about her being Max, is a trained super soldier, genetically enhanced super soldier, who's escaped from the government and she's on the run. That's one of the reasons why she feels like she needs to steal and hide, so that she has a few resources in case she needs to run from the government again. So the show is mainly a sci-fi show, but I was wondering, let's go, what if they went a different route? What if it became like a supernatural show? What if it became a more mystical and magical show? And in season 2, it kind of was going that direction a little bit. But for season 1, it was mainly a sci-fi show. But anyway, so I had this thought, I had this idea. What if this cat statue was cursed? And so I started building upon that idea. And I was like, okay, so if this cat statue is cursed, what is the curse? What does it do? How does it affect its victim? So I started playing around with that idea. And as I was playing around with that idea, I started creating videos and images. And I'll show you some earlier videos and images that I do, because like I said, to help me paint a picture, to help me get a concept of an idea, I like to create images. I like to create videos. I like to use my resources that I have to help me paint a picture in my mind's eye to see how, and in this case, how dark and creepy. Am I going too dark and creepy? Is this a little too intense? We'll see. So that's why I like to create videos to see, give me an actual visual representation of what I'm creating, to see if it's a little too dark, a little too, maybe not appropriate for certain things. Because again, I want to create stories that thrill, amaze, inspire, and uplift. And sometimes my mind goes into like the dark corners, like the dark side of fantasy that a lot of people don't like to venture into. And sometimes I have to play around with this concept. It's like, is this concept a little too dark? Is it a little too grim? And I thought, well, maybe this is a perfect chance, since I'm writing a thriller book, to make my story just a little darker, make it a little bit more intense, and maybe not appropriate to all viewers, and that's okay. I've learned that it's okay to, there's some stories that maybe not entirely appropriate for viewers, but that's where it depends on the audience you're trying to reach. What is the message you're trying to share? And that's going back to how this story came to be. Because I had this idea. I had this concept. What if this statue was cursed? So I started in the middle of the story, if you will. I started picturing what would happen if this statue was cursed. What can I do? What does this cat statue do? What is the curse of this statue. So I started writing the story in the middle. And I'm going to start where I started in my mind, in the middle. I'm going to read to you a passage from Be Careful What You Steal, from Tales from Other Worlds and Realms, from my novel. I'm going to read that here in a moment. And with the reading, I created a video. And this is one of the videos that I created recently to help, again, paint that picture in my mind's eye, to help me capture and describe what was going on to one of the characters in my stories. And like I said, I started this story in the middle. And as a true writer, you start wherever the story takes you. If you have an idea, if you have a concept, you start where the idea is. But then you have to put in feelers. And a good storyteller adds those feelers to make the story make sense. Because again, I don't want to just write a story just to write a story because, ooh, this scene sounds like a good scene. I would love that scene. It has to make sense. Because I've seen too many books. I've also seen too many shows where you could tell they just added that scene in. They just added that scene just to have that scene in, but it made no sense to the plot line. It made no sense to the actual story itself. And I don't want to do that with my stories. I always want to have my stories have meaning and make sense. I want my stories to inspire, uplift, and most importantly, get people to think about the deeper meaning and the messages and the symbolism behind the story. So like I said, I'm going to start reading a clip, do another author reading, and this time I'm reading, like I said, I'm starting in the middle of the story, and I'm not going to read the ending. You'll all have to buy the book, read it yourself, especially if you enjoy this middle part of the story. If you guys really enjoy this middle part, then I know you're going to love the whole book, because it's filled with a lot of thrillers. It's filled with so many things that will just excite, amaze. If you're into darker fantasy, if you're into thrillers, then this collection of stories is for you. It's got all sorts of fun, wonderful tales. And like I said, sometimes it's a little dark and a little spooky, and some people might question, why in the world did you write that story? Well, because I like to tiptoe sometimes on that line of dark fantasy and fantasy itself, because fantasy can take you in so many places, in so many directions. And most of the time, like I said, it starts with an idea, a concept. Just like this story was inspired by Dark Angel, the very first episode. And that's why a lot of the scenes that you're seeing from in this clip are from Dark Angel itself. I figured, why not use Dark Angel, since it inspired the story? I could use the clips from Dark Angels to help me capture and paint that picture within my story. So I hope you all enjoy it. Sit back and get ready to hear Be Careful What You Steal. So like I said, I'm going to start in the middle of the story, so it might not make much sense at first. If you want the full story, you're just going to have to buy the book, which is available on Amazon and on Kindle, and I'll include those links in the description below. But yeah, sit back and enjoy the story of Be Careful What You Steal. Soon, the only peace and relaxation came to Jessica through her evening bike rides. No matter how sick she felt, no matter how hard it was to function that day, she would always find rest, renewal, and peace during her bike rides. She didn't understand why her health and strength seemed to be declining more and more. And yet, she still found the energy and strength to ride. Riding became her only salvation. One night, right after her bike ride, Jessica came home. She had a very long and hard day, but still had a slight smile on her face. She put her house keys down on the table, walked into her bedroom, and removed all her clothes except her sports bra and short shorts. Normally, she would head straight for the shower and bathe before bed, but she was too tired this night. Instead, she went to her bed and laid on her back with her arms raised above her head. She closed her eyes and started to drift to sleep. She wasn't fully asleep yet. Sorry. She wasn't fully asleep, yet she wasn't awake either. As she laid there, she started feeling strange. She could feel the cat statue on her nightstand staring at her. It was staring at her body, staring at her as if it were a lonely man who stumbled across a beautiful woman sunbathing on the beach. Suddenly, a green mist started leaving the statue. The mist started to slither and move towards Jessica, as if it was a snake and her a mouse in the bushes. The mist divided itself into several different limbs and continued to climb and slither until they were on the bed. All the streams of mist crawled over Jessica's bare skin, giving her goosebumps and chills. The several streams of mist then began slithering, crawling, and wiggling into every hole it could find on Jessica's body. Some went into her nostrils, some into her ears, one through her lips, down her throat. Some even wiggled and crawled into her exposed navel, untying the knot deep within to slide on in. Jessica laid there helpless as the streams of mist poured out of the cat statue into every hole, nook, and cranny it could find on Jessica. Jessica didn't wiggle or squirm, no matter how much she wanted to. It felt wrong in every way, and she felt violated from head to toe, yet she couldn't move a single inch. Finally, the mist stopped coming from the statue, and the last bit of fog entered Jessica's body, vanishing completely. Jessica instantly sat up, covered in a little sweat, and stared coldly at the cat statue. She slowly got up, walked over to the statue, and picked it up. It looked completely normal. Nothing about it seemed to have changed. The thought came to Jessica's mind, was that all a dream? It must have been. I don't feel any different. I'm sure if that really did happen, I would still be feeling creeped out and violated. She put the statue back on the stand and crawled back to bed. This time she wrapped herself in her covers, covering every inch of her, including her head. And I'm going to stop right there. I know. Very suspenseful, very intense, and like I said, this is one of those darker stories, darker fantasies that I wrote. It's not for every viewer, but again, I wrote it to mystify, to amaze, mainly to creep out a lot of people, because every now and then it's good to get those goosebumps, those scares, those thrillers. And again, if you want to read the full story, please go buy the book on Amazon or on Kindle and read the whole story yourself, because like I said, you're only getting a portion of the story, a very small portion. And that was the small portion that started the whole story. I started there. I started with that imagination. I started with that thought. And then I built upon it and I added to it. So when you read the whole story makes that scene make sense. It makes complete sense when you read the whole story. I just didn't add that scene just to have that scene in. I worked hard to make the story flow with this scene, with this idea, with this concept. And if you like that idea, I do, like I said, I do a lot of creative videos and other stuff on my DeviantArt page, and I'll also include that on my link. Because that's where I've said it in a few other videos. I go to DeviantArt to brainstorm. I go to DeviantArt to try out concepts, to test the waters, to see what kind of reactions people will get with some of my thoughts, especially my darker fantasy thoughts. Because I love fantasy in general. And sometimes stories have dark twists to them. Sometimes they're not always happy. But I also believe that if you work hard, even those dark fantasies, you could actually have a message to share. And with those messages, it can, even if it seems dark, even if it seems hopeless, there's still a little bit of ray of hope deep within those messages. And that's what I feel a good story writer does, is incorporates messages, incorporates symbolism with every story that they write. And with every story that I write, I always try to put a piece of myself, a piece of my imagination, but most importantly, a piece of my heart into every story that I write, even my thrillers. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. I don't know when I'll be making another video, but we'll see. Until then, have fun, and please be on the lookout for my books. Again, I'm working really hard. I'm in the middle of another novel, and I'm hoping this novel will inspire a lot of people as well as these other books. So please keep looking out for my books, and please, you know, if you do like my videos, please like and subscribe. I love to see people actually watching and viewing my videos. It thrills me that, I'm actually not wasting my time with these videos. People are actually enjoying them and liking them. So it helps me a lot to know that people are out there watching and wanting to know more about me and about my novels. So, again, have a great day and keep on reading and keep looking for my future books and stories. See you next time.